Hey everybody, we're back with Unwrapping the Pharaohs, lesson number 9. And this chapter is called More Shoddy Pyramids, okay? Again, the shoddy pyramids were not very well constructed. They were kind of falling apart and they not very pretty. What we see of them today is mostly just rubble, mounds and heaps of rubble. But as I said earlier, they found a lot of interesting artifacts and information from them. And at one point, we have a Dr. Kanawati. He was a professor of Macquarie Institute or University in Sydney, Australia. Okay, and he is excavating at Saqqara. And as he's excavating and looking through basically this rubble of the shoddy pyramids, he finds a mastaba, and eventually he discovers it's the mastaba of Meraraku. Okay, he was the vizier of King Teti, the sixth dynasty. It was in the northeast of a massive step pyramid. Eventually, he excavates the tomb of Meraki's mother, okay? Some of the information he finds in here is some papyri and different things that talks about Manetho. And Manetho, we talked on another lesson about. He was an Egyptian priest, but he was more than a priest. He was a historian. He was a vizier. He was a very important person in around the 3rd century BC. Okay, and so his writings kind of give us a lot of information about the history of Egypt. Again, he's the one who gave us the dynasties of Egypt as he was making the history. So in his writings, he has a story about the 6th dynasty had 6 kings of Memphis, and one of those kings was Otheos. And later, this person is identified as the Pharaoh Teti. He reigned for about 30 years, but then was killed by his bodyguards. And, this was kind of an interesting story and one that Dr. Kanawati was looking at. But the question was it myth or was it truth? And he wasn't sure. However, and one of the reasons he wasn't sure was because Manetho lived, almost 1,500 years ago. And so he's trying to figure out if there's any truth to what Manetho was saying. And eventually, Dr. Kanawati discovers some evidence. He found a tomb that also had bodyguards buried with it. And the relief with the bodyguard, this picture with relief of the bodyguard who has his nose cut off, which would have been a humiliating punishment, especially as he lived. But also there was a bodyguard that had his feet cut off, which would have been a devastating afterlife, punishment for the afterlife. Bodyguards' names were removed, but not by graffiti, okay? So they weren't sure. They were actually chiseled out, okay? So basically what this Dr. Kanawati says is that due to this evidence of these, bodyguards found who had their noses cut off, that there was this relief showing this humiliating punishments, and then the names of the bodyguards actually being chiseled out and not done by graffiti, is that maybe Manetho was right. Maybe there was a bodyguard who took over and killed this pharaoh and took over the throne, because then he could have removed his name and things. So what else they discovered from these shoddy pyramids is that the kings of the 5th and 6th dynasty all were very wealthy. They had a lot of wealth. They created very costly and very exquisite mastabas. The number of reliefs that showed everyday life was numerous. And then there was the Serapeum at Saqqara. It was the tomb of Ti. He was the overseer of the sun temples of Neferkare and Nyasori. They were overseers of. He was also the overseer of the mastaba Meraraku. Then he was the vizier of the Pharaoh Teti. Okay, so he was an extremely important person, and they found his tombs. And inside these tombs, there was reliefs showing hunting and fishing, etc. Big parties. They just showed that there was lots of wealth and lots of peace actually during this time. Also, they found near the pyramid of Unis, the mastaba for Princess Idat, which was his daughter. There was a very strange relief. Okay, these pictures, again, a relief is basically an art, work showing pictures of things that were going on. And it was a hippo who was having a baby with a crocodile about to eat the baby as it came out. And that still kind of baffles the people in trying to figure out what exactly did that mean. Some of the other people that we see here from the Shoddy Pyramids is Pepi the First. Had a remarkable life-size statue that was found, in the rubble of his pyramid. And then there was also several smaller ones of his son. And then there was evidence of Pepi II, as we talked about in a different lesson to talk about. He was the longest ruling pharaoh for 92 years. He lived almost 100 years, and like I said, his reign was 92 years. And then the last of the 6th dynasty rulers was Nitocris. And Nitocris was a she, okay? She is known as the first female pharaoh. And again, all of this is per the account of Manetho. So even though we have evidence to kind of support this, the question still remains, how much of what Manetho said was true and how much of it was just, fables and stuff that was passed down and on. And hopefully we'll continue to get more and more evidence to prove one way or the other.